You're just like, what the hell?
And in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to Guide to the Grind, the podcast that deals with money, mindset, and momentum. Today, joining me as always is one of Canada's top mortgage brokers, the blueberry to my muffin, Mr. Jonathan Tilger. Jonathan, how are you today?
Well, I'm blueberry, so that would mean I'm feeling a little bit warm inside the muffin, a little bit squishy, all that stuff. Doing awesome. How about yourself, Jeff?
Why do you got to make it weird?
You started out calling me the blueberry to your muffin, and I'm making it weird. Really, we're going there, are we?
Oh, JT, we've had a little hiatus. I think it's been about 3 weeks since we've recorded, maybe
Yeah,
4.
about that. I mean, it's been summertime. We've been off doing various things, but yeah, been missing this. Been missing. I mean, we obviously talk on a regular basis, but missing having our little recorded chats where we had to actually pay attention to what we're saying and make sure we have some sort of flow to it.
So this is interesting, JT. We were having a team meeting with our mortgage guys yesterday and teaching them about positioning. And you were like, you know what, that'd be a great topic. And I'd like to, change positions on. That sounded weird. Like to change the dynamic.
Did you want me to take it since you seem to be stumbling through this one? So yes, as you're saying, we're talking about positioning, and we want to change the position of where we're standing today, and actually have. Usually, you're asking me more questions, but as you've got the sales background, and this was really the meeting that you led going through. I mean, with our team, you lead quite a few, but you really led this meeting talking about positioning and what it's all about. And so I thought, hey, this would be something great to talk about, because when you think positioning, and when we get into it, you understand what we mean. You can think obviously business, sales, that kind of thing, but really positioning is a life skill. And so why don't you start by telling us, when we're talking about positioning, what are we talking about here?
So I think the best example I had when I started talking about this yesterday was asking you about your son, who's now 7,
Yes.
Brandon, and saying, when he wants something, who's selling who? Let's say he wants ice cream. Do you give him ice cream right away?
Generally not, no.
No. And he generally tries to sell you, right? And kids are, by the way, the best salespeople in the world. They don't take no for an answer very lightly. Much unlike adults who hear no the first time and they shudder and shy away. Kids are like, well, why not? Because I said so.
And as you said that, I mean, what's one of the tactics most kids go to? One of the first things they start out doing is just they start sort of whining, crying. But that's one of those, you want to get that out of them as quick as possible, because that's not a life skill that lasts very long.
No, but it's surprising the number of adults that actually still use that as their number one tactic.
Exactly.
But positioning is understanding that in every relationship, and I'm going to dampen my words, the FU position is what we should always be seeking for in relationships. And that is simply and that's a quote from The Gambler with, I think, Mark Wahlberg and John Goodman. But my friend Todor, our friend Todor, was the one that really told me about being in that position. And it's not necessarily about, screw everybody and the world is mine. It's about understanding that in every relationship, there's an alpha and a beta position. And it's not who's better or whatever, but somebody has something they want and somebody has something that the other person wants. And whenever you're in that position, no matter whether it's life or sales, trying to get the other person to give you what you want becomes your whole goal when you're in that beta position. But when you're in the alpha position, you have control over how everything goes. You're able to exchange what that person wants for something you want, which takes me back to like the number one sales trainer in the world, Zig Ziglar. You can have anything in the world you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. But understanding when you get on in a sales situation, positioning is everything. And most people don't understand as salespeople that they actually have the advantage. They're in the alpha position because if what they have is worthy to sell, which you
Yes.
shouldn't be selling anything that isn't worthy to sell, unless you fully believe in that system or fully believe in that product. You should never be selling it. But because you have such a high belief in that, you're actually in the alpha position, because once you get really good at explaining what it is you have, the person on the other end of the phone is going to want it. That's your job, is to make them want it. But
Yes.
typically when people get on the first conversation they have with a new prospect, they think the prospect is in the alpha position and they're trying to get money from them. And that's unfortunately a very defeating mindset when you first pick up a phone or first send out an email.
Yeah. So just going back to what you said, because I mean, sales is so important, and I'll say that I reluctantly got into sales. I never saw myself as a salesperson
Mm-hmm.
because I viewed the salesperson as kind of the I'll say the sleazy used car salesman,
Herb
or the
Tarlick.
or the or like the guy who, like, the vacuum salesman. I remember that years ago, coming around door to door selling a vacuum and all these other things. And I always viewed
We had a filter queen.
and I always viewed sales as, it's like, and I think that I think where my whole perception changed around sales, it really comes down to, are you selling something you truly believe in? Because once you get to that point where, hey, you know what, I am truly helping the person out, I'm bringing true value to them, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really, I mean, in my perception, I'm not really selling at that point. I am bringing value to their life,
Mm-hmm.
making their life easier, bringing them something they really need, and so forth. And so, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this saying: the person says, "Oh, I could sell ice to Eskimos," and forget about the stereotypical. I mean, it's Inuit and all the other stuff now, but that whole saying of, that's one thing I could never get behind, because you're trying to sell something to somebody that they don't need. It has no value to them. And so that's the big difference here.
I 100% agree. I think yeah, I hate those old expressions, because I don't want to be selling somebody something they can't use, don't want, or they're going to come back and be upset because they bought it from me. Um,
Or whether they come back or not, they just have regret over buying it for the next, however many years they're having this thing.
well, absolutely, but I mean, I've worked in investments, and thankfully, I didn't get any investors into something that went terribly awry. And which debacle I speak of in the Canadian mortgage world. And I was brand new at the time, and I was trying to raise investor capital, and thankfully, I kind of saw the writing on the wall before it happened, and was able to not be harmed by it. But you want to make sure 100% what you're doing for your people before you ever get to the point of telling other people about it. I think it's also important to kind of go back about, like, there's two parts. It's not just about selling. First of all, a person has to believe that they're providing a service. Selling is a service. And it's really interesting. If you look at somebody like my stepdad back in the day, was a really good tire salesman, but he didn't sell. His customers called him for orders. It was really interesting, because I was kind of getting into the sales world at the time, but I understood he had such established relationships that he no longer had to sell. He was just now more or less a broker, because his people trusted him.
Yes.
And it was a really good lesson. And it's really interesting to see this dynamic now in my life, because a lot of the people I've done business with or do business with have become my friends. But a person has to get, in the beginning, has to get really comfortable understanding that sales is not Herb Tarlick selling used cars and wearing white shoes and white belts and plaid pants. And that is the stereotype that a lot of us go back to. Zig Ziglar did a really great example of just your morning breakfast and how complicated a morning breakfast actually is. If you think about, let's say you have the balanced breakfast that you see on TV, where you've got a couple pieces of toast, glass of orange juice, cereal, maybe a fried egg. Um, you look at like that orange juice probably came from Florida somewhere.
Yes.
You look at the eggs came from a dairy farm or came from a chicken farm somewhere. The milk came from a dairy farm somewhere. The cereal grains came from the Midwest somewhere. And you know, if you're a hipster and you're eating avocado toast, well, that came from California or Mexico even. And
Yeah.
if you're eating mangoes, that stuff can come from even farther away. But
Yes.
in between that food leaving where it was grown or cultivated uh, to your breakfast table required at least one salesperson, if not many more. And those salespeople are what allow trucks to drive. They're what allow people to work in the fields. Because if the farmer growing the food didn't sell his food to someone, those trucks would never move. That grain would never get eaten. That the crops would fail. Everything would fall apart. So sales is one of the most noble professions there is. Now, in every profession, there's the cream of the crop and the cream of the crap.
Yes. Way to pull that expression back in. Haven't heard that in a while.
And that's the hard part. Just because somebody's new doesn't mean that they're crap. It's where their moral compass points.
Yeah.
You know, could I use a lot of the techniques that I've learned to hatch evil schemes? Yes, probably I could. There's a lot of understanding of psychology that goes into persuasion. There's a lot of things that um, have been used by both good and bad people in the past to create a better world or a worse world. And there are a lot of the same techniques that you learn along the way. But a person's moral compass, if it's set to be, hey, I want to do right by this client so that I can look them in the eyes after the sale is made, I don't think they could ever go wrong.
Well,
But
and that,
they're
that's
go
and
sorry, go ahead.
that's where just along those lines, what you were saying, and going back to what the example you said about your stepfather, where if you do it that way, and this is, I'll say, the short-sighted versus the long-term salesperson. The long-term salesperson says, hey, I want to do right by my clients. So 10 years from now, they still want to use me. They still want to do business with me
Mm-hmm.
because my life will be so much easier then.
Yeah. What
Because
is it?
if you're now just essentially, you're no longer, essentially now you're farming as opposed to going out and hunting every day to get the, because you're just, by farming, you're just nurturing the relationships you've built over years.
Yep.
It makes your life so much easier.
Was it Gil Gerard, the world's greatest car salesman, figured out that every customer he had bought an average, I think, 5 cars in their lifetime. So he became a master at keeping in touch with them, sending them birthday cards, Christmas cards, Thanksgiving
Yep.
cards, so that in 5 years, when they came back to buy another car, they weren't going to anybody else. They were coming to him because he's been in touch with them for the last 5 years.
Oh, exactly the case.
And the guy sold, I think it was something like 1,300 cars in a year. I do believe the record has been broken since, but nobody's as famous. He sold like it was 1,300 cars in a year, I believe. Um, which, if you think about it, that's like 4 or 5 cars a day.
Yeah.
That's
That's
crazy.
yeah.
That's crazy. And that takes you years to get that good. Like to have that many repeat clients and even creating new clients, because that's one thing that people forget about. They get all these old clients, and one of them gets sick and dies, God forbid, but it happens, and all of a sudden you lose all of your clientele. You always have to be in that fresh mode of always prospecting.
So can we go back to where we started out, and that's really talking about the
No.
positioning, and I really appreciate our playfulness back and forth here. Really, it's great. So if we can go back to where we started from, which is the positioning side, and I know we started out talking about kind of the alpha and beta in every interaction, and most people, especially well, most people, when they go into an interaction, and I'll say sales, but also you're going to ask somebody out on a date. Most people's approach is, I'm going to go in as the beta, trying to win this person over, as opposed to,
So this is so I see a little hair hanging from my microphone. It's bothering me. This is an interesting thing because this is one of my least favorite things when you're talking about relationships is seeing somebody come in as a beta, um, because it's a false pretense Typically, it's like, yeah, I agree with all the things that you say, and I don't have my own personality just so that we can hang out and be around each other. And it's the same as in sales. Now, if that person's end goal is to actually date that person, it's false pretenses. They're trying to be buddies first and then trying to close the deal.
Yeah.
Same way with sales. If you're calling up a prospect, you're not friends. You're trying to do business. You don't go to the cashier at Walmart who's selling you stuff to different type of sales, but it's still sales. You don't go talk to that cashier for 25 minutes and then hand the money over. If you talk to that cashier for 25 minutes, chances are that sale's not getting done. There's a problem typically. You're trying to make a return, trying to get a discount, something like that. You're going to probably need a manager. It's the same in prospecting. Now, it's not to say that people won't become your friends, but you can't come in with a mentality of I want to just be nice to this person. You have to come in with I have what this person needs, and it's my job to help them understand that. I think that's one of the biggest blockages in the mind that I see with new salespeople, especially.
Yeah.
Is they come in begging for business instead of understanding that if they had a better posture, if they're trying to get their path is getting friend zoned. And I remember doing this back in the day. I worked at a company. We had to make 100 cold calls a day to big, private equity firms, CEOs, and stuff like this. And it was really intense. And I remember, sometimes you get on the phone call with a guy for 25 minutes, you think it's going to be the best thing ever. Next time you call back, he doesn't answer your phone call or he doesn't return your text, which we weren't allowed to text. But that's because as Jordan Belfort says, you got off the line. You're now his buddy. You're not going towards the goal. It's the same thing in dating. If you come in too soft, you're going to be seen as a friend and not as somebody that's a potential mate. And I don't know about you, but at the end of the date, I'm at least going in for a hug. I'd like to try and get a kiss. It's the same with the sale. I want to go in and let my intentions be known. I'm not here to just be friends. I want to do some business together. I
And
want
and
to see
with
where this goes.
and with the sale, I'll just say that you need to come out of every interaction. I mean, depending on what you're selling, every interaction will not necessarily end with the contract being sold, but you have what's your clear intent you're coming out with. So some sort of commitment from them to move to the next step of the sales process.
Well, I think that's it's super important to understand. Like you need to leave that conversation as the alpha.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about like being the alpha male. Oh, I'm talking about somebody has something and is leading the way for the other person. Typically, when you get on that phone call, the newer salesperson can be on that phone call thinking, oh God, I need their business. Instead of thinking that person is sitting there waiting for me to call to offer our solution to their problem. I just have to get good at helping them understand that I have that solution, which of course is the best way to do it, is always asking, never telling. God, if people only got that one. Make their lives so much easier. But you have to be setting up the next meeting, just selling and relationships are exactly the same thing. You don't want to leave that first date. Now, I'm not going to try and close the deal on the first date. I don't expect to wake up there in the morning. Same with a sale. I don't expect that on the first interaction, but I do want to set up the next date. I do want to set up the next meeting and understand that I'm helping to guide the process. It doesn't mean I got to be a bully. It doesn't mean I have to control everything. It just means that I'm opening up a possibility for the future by setting up the next time, so I don't let the relationship drift apart. Did that answer your question? Was it even a
Yeah,
question?
that was pretty much that's exactly it. I mean, keeping it moving forward. I mean, as you say, when you go into every interaction, one person is selling the other. One person is always selling the other person.
Yeah.
And it's either basically you're selling, meaning that it doesn't mean that, as you say, it doesn't mean you're being a bully. It doesn't mean that, hey, you're being that rough, tough alpha and whatever else, but it means that, hey, your agenda you've got, here's the things you want to come out of that meeting with. And as sort of the conversation pulls back, you go back into, okay, here's one of the outcomes I need to have, and making sure you keep moving it forward towards that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think understanding that process, understanding who's in the alpha and beta position, like just this basic understanding of human relationships. Whenever you're meeting with somebody, especially for business or dating, somebody has something the other person wants.
Or I mean, let's face it, or you talking about dating, or just a friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody has something the other person wants. And there's times where it's more important to understand this, but it also helps you really understand human interaction, because humans are really weird. Um, uh, People are really bad at getting their needs met. It's a really strange thing, and they're also, some are very challenging at letting you know what their intentions are. Sometimes they tell you they're one thing and they're another. But if you can start to understand the basics of human interaction, knowing, okay, who's in the alpha position, who's in the beta. If you're in the beta, play the role. But if you don't need to remain in the beta, why stay there? It's always better to be leading than to be following. And there's no shame in, like, you don't have to walk in the room like beating your chest like a gorilla. It's about just understanding, if I have something this person wants, what do they have that I want? And it could be as simple as, this person's looking for a friend. Do you have a pet? You have a cat?
Yes.
You're in the alpha position. You have the food, you have the water. What is it about a cat that you want?
Their attention every once in a while. Their love, their affection.
Now, they try to stay in that alpha position, but you can hold back the food and the water. So ultimately, you have control. But it's a very simple interaction. It's a very base interaction that once you get really good at understanding who's got what, who wants, you can really start to control conversations at your pace and relationships at your pace, and understand what motivators are. That's kind of what comes next. Once you understand who's in what position, what are the motivators, what are the key, we were talking to our guys yesterday. We wrote down, okay, if we're talking to realtors about how to get more clients for them, or how to monetize the clients they already have, which you and I have. I got some ideas that I wrote down. You and I need to talk about. I'm actually really excited about that. I forgot to tell you before we started this. And I'm not foreshadowing the event on September 22nd. However, there is an event on September 22nd. Might as well throw it in there. But one of the things we were talking is about, like, what do they really want? And what's a feature? What's a benefit? And the benefits are, somebody needs money. They need more time. They need this. They have this need, and we can cure it. Whereas a benefit is, you'll be helping people. Most people's number one motivators are not about other people. They'll say they are, but if it comes down to food on somebody else's table or food on your own, I don't know too many that would choose food on someone else's table first.
Yeah.
And it's just the basics of it. That's the basics of understanding people. But knowing, if you have something they want, you need to be getting something in return. And this is when you look at relationships that are really toxic. That's because people don't, one person has an inflated sense of what they need from the other person, who no longer wants anything from that. And that's when things get really out of whack. Like, it happens in business and it happens in relationships. One person doesn't want to let go, and the other person is already done. And it sucks, but it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle and it just gets toxic if you don't realize that, okay, this point of us having a mutual exchange is over.
Yeah.
And that person tries to hold on to the alpha position. This is when, like, if a deal goes really south and the client's like, oh, I hate you and I never want to see you again, you just got to let it go, because you're not going to, you can try to fix it. And there is a possibility, but sometimes it's just better because a lot of times it's caused because the wrong person is trying to retain the alpha position and they don't actually have it.
Well, and at the end of the day, it's important to remember that, and this goes back to, again, with our team and making sales calls and all these things, and whether it's sales calls or dating or whatever else, it's the same thing. And got to remember that at the end of the day, you're not meant to interact with everybody. You're not meant to
Yep.
have everyone as your client. You're not meant to date everybody. There's certain
Mhm.
people, and you said about letting go. And the sooner you can recognize that in the engagement that, hey, it's time to let go of this one, the better it is for you. Cause now you can move on. I mean, if you're talking dating, now you can potentially meet the person who you're gonna marry as opposed to the person who's gonna string you along for the next 5 years.
Yeah,
Or with
absolutely.
business, you rather than putting all this effort into somebody who may do one deal with you over the next 2 years, but it's such a pain, it's not really worth it to you. Now you can meet the client or the clients who truly love you, you love them, you guys love doing business together, and it becomes effortless to work with them as the same for them to work with you.
And that's the thing. And I'm a huge fan of success is the best revenge. If somebody's pissing you off, go work with their friends, make money with their friends. That'd really be a great way to get back at them instead of staying petty. You're just enjoying your life and being successful. And if you make some connections that happen to be associated, well, it don't hurt if they happen to hear how successful you are. I actually remember one of my mentors, Andre Maronian, talking about having worked as an engineer and he was the first time I heard too much month left at the end of the money, and he knew exactly where his money left out. It was the third Thursday of the month at exactly 12:04 p.m. because he tried to buy lunch at work and couldn't. Um, but a group of engineers, when he had left his company to go start his own business, and he was a very successful network marketer, still is. Um, they were making fun of him, and he said that a group of his friends were in a restaurant and they were making fun of him talking behind his back. And one of his team members happened to be their waiter. And they said, "Oh, this Andre Maroney," and it slapped down a magazine that he had been featured in that month on the table with, I believe, his SL 55 AMG, I believe was the car that he had in there, and it was one of those things. You know, he's making $30,000 as an engineer. All his friends are, "Oh, no, no, don't do it, don't do it. You're an idiot." He leaves, and they make fun of him, and somebody else gives that validation because, um, wow, I got off on a tangent, but I'm not petty, but I do believe like if you're working with somebody and they're giving you a hard time, it's kind of satisfying to go make money with their friends, or go make money with people that are close to them, so that they see that you know it was them, not you. Or hopefully they see that. They probably won't, but hopefully they'll see that. But yeah, it's super important to be able to understand the need to fire clients. I think we've gotten too much of this the customer is always right mentality in your head.
Yep.
That's a scarcity mentality. That's trying to get, fine if you're the local grocer and there's a small town and there's only a limited number of people that are going to be able to come in there because it's geographically limited. But nowadays, with the world being so connected, it's okay to fire clients because there's plenty more out there.
I'd give a definition of when you say the customer's always right. I mean, is this somebody who ultimately is making you money, or is it somebody who's just a pain in your side?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the old Pareto distribution, the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
20% of your results are going to come from 80% of your people, and the top 20% are going to be 80%. So you spend your time with that 80% of your clients, especially get to know them and what they like and what they do, because they're going to help you understand how you sold them and be able to get to that alpha position, bringing it back
Yep.
much quicker with new prospects.
Yeah.
Because if those are the people you want to do business with, you want to go find people that look like them.
Exactly.
You don't want to go find the 80%.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with those 80%. They're probably people who they will be served incredibly well by somebody else, but they're not necessarily, again, it's no different than dating. And you can go out with someone who's a great person, but the two of you just don't click.
Mm-hmm.
You
Absolutely.
introduce her to your friend, and suddenly, oh my God, she's awesome, and they just click and they get married, and that's all the stuff there. Whereas with yourself, it's just, hey, you know what? it wasn't the right fit for the two of us.
I
And
think
there's nothing wrong with that.
that's a great point you said though about introducing your even introducing them to your friends. I think that's a great way to deal with rejecting a customer or a client. Introduce them to somebody else that you feel would be more in line with their way of thinking. And as you start when you're starting out, maybe you don't know those people, but I know a million different people that I can send people to, especially if I know it's going to save me time. It's better to give up. I'd rather work harder at getting newer clients than harder at servicing one,
Yeah.
because it just the reward versus risk is much better. Having trouble speaking. Can you believe that I'm having trouble speaking, Jonathan? Now just on this.
Well, we are in reverse position today, so it makes sense.
Fair. Um, who's the alpha and who's the beta here? Uh, one thing I think is important to understand, and I made this point yesterday when we were talking to our team. It doesn't matter what the ticket price or the sticker price is on what you're selling. There's always going to be a process of selling required, whether it's free, whether it's $50 or it's $50 million. There's still going to be a requirement for people to be sold. And this is the interesting thing, because 50 million and 50, the only difference is the timeline. Free and $50, the difference is people believe that free is too good to be true.
Yeah.
I'll tell you an experiment that I conducted myself. I walked from Bloor to Queen and then University in Toronto down Yonge Street. I tried to hand out a $5 bill with my friend Janine, and she will attest to this. I could not hand out a $5 bill to somebody just walking down the street. Of course, there's people that I could have handed it to that were pretty easy to, but I wanted the social experiment of walking down the street and just handing somebody a $5 bill. And I'd walk up to them like, here's a $5 bill. And they're like, no. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't want that. I am literally offering them free money and they wouldn't take it. What's that tell you about how messed up people really are? Jonathan, would you refuse free money?
Would I refuse free money? No.
You'd like to think you wouldn't, but statistics say otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, I'd say I wouldn't, but again, as it comes at you, if someone's just your whole thing, okay, what's attached to this? What's going on? What are they? What's the? I always go back to the what was it? The $25 check that arrived in the mail from the bank, where if you endorse the check, you realize that you signed up for all kinds of stuff that would cost you $5 a month for the next 20 years.
So isn't that interesting though? Another example, a great story I heard was there were three generations of women cooking in the kitchen the one day, and the mother grabs the ham, and she cuts both ends off the ham, throws them in the garbage, and cooks the ham in the pot. And the daughter's watching and says, Mom, why do you do that? She said, well, I don't know. We just always did that when I was growing up. So the daughter had obviously picked that up as well. But the mom, now wanting to think about that, why did that happen? She went back to her mother and asked, Mom, why did we always cut the ends off the ham? And she said, well, when the Great Depression was happening, we only had one pot that we could cook it in, one roasting pan, and it wasn't big enough. So we had to cut the ends off the ham to be able to fit it in the roasting pan. And they didn't throw them away. I'm sure they used them as a Great Depression. But it was interesting how this, just this example of one family tradition in the cooking could carry on 3 generations later because somebody did something once, and that's just the way they saw it. It's kind of the same way a lot of people, they take their financial education, but we tend to do what we're conditioned to do. You're conditioned to think about the endorsing of that $25 check when really it's just some stranger doing some social experiment for him and a friend on a Tuesday afternoon, trying to hand out a $5 bill on Yonge Street. You put all of these things in the way of what this possibly could be. And what is it? It's a snack or a couple of cans of pop or something. It's nothing. It's free.
Yeah.
But imagine going out there and trying to sell a product and not understanding that simple concept. You're in the alpha position, but the other people believe they are. You're walking down the street with something they want, free money, literally free money. But they become the alpha person and like, no, I don't want it. No, I'm not going to convince everybody to try and take a $5 bill. It was more of an experiment. But if I stopped them and said, no, I really want you just to take this $5 bill, do you think some of those people would take the $5 bill?
If you stopped them, you had a moment and you could actually break through, then yeah, definitely.
Would all of them?
Probably not.
No, that is sales.
Yes.
Right there. At its basest form, it's free. It's free money. I got to sell people on it. Some are going to take it. Some are going to tell me to screw off. And some are actually like, they're going to look at it, examine it, and still say no. And that is sales 101. That's a free thing. Imagine what happens when it costs $50. You have to get really good at the words that come out of your mouth. And you have to really get good at painting concepts and having intention and understanding who's alpha, who's beta. But the very first base of it is coming on that phone or entering that room knowing that they have or you have what they want. And the fair exchange is their money for it. With our guys, we're talking to them. They're calling, they cold call realtors to work with realtors as mortgage agents and invite them to our September 22nd event.
Yes. It'll be held 12 noon, September 22nd. Yes.
It's really interesting because they're thinking, I'm getting on the phone with a realtor because I really need to do business with them. When in actuality, no matter what, if they call enough realtors, they'll get business. So it doesn't matter who they're talking to. When they come on in that beta position thinking, I need this realtor to do business with me, they fail. And it's unfortunate. It's part of the process. It's part of the way that the learning works. But if they come on thinking, I have something that can change this realtor's business, I can help them monetize clients they just closed.
Yep.
That's the crazy thing.
Yep.
You just sold a house to these guys. How would you like to sell another one to them?
And it could change the relationship completely with those clients long term.
Absolutely. But that's not what the realtor's thinking in that moment. You get on that phone, the person that is calling has to be thinking, I can show them how to make money right now with a client they just closed. Yep. And what realtor wouldn't love to get 2 sales out of 1 client right away or something to that? Or yes, it's great to give them all of the stuff around it, but straight up, hey, you want to make more money out of the client you just closed? Boom. Here's how you do it. Our guys understanding that concept first has to happen. They have to know that they've got something that realtor would love to have. Instead of thinking, I want that realtor's clients. No. I got something. If I show this realtor that I have this, they're going to die to get it.
Yeah.
That changes the positioning before you're ever on the phone. You come on both as alphas instead of a beta and an alpha. And now you have to jostle for position, and that's where the art of it comes in. But it changes that whole call dynamic that most salespeople have when they're calling up whomever. I remember when I would call up CEOs of big capital firms, and I felt like the little kid pulling on their coattails. Now I have those conversations every day, and a lot of times I don't want to talk to these people because you start to realize the different dynamic, from back then being green to now knowing what I know. A lot of times it's just not worth the time.
And pulling back to what you said at the start, I mean, you worded it as the FU position. And as you say, it's not about being rude. It's not about anything like that, but it's recognizing if this person doesn't see what you're offering, if they don't see the value you're bringing, next. It's like you don't need this person as the salesperson calling. You don't need this person.
I like to put that a little more harshly just to try and drive the point home. But
Yes.
I think it's also okay. I think it's an important note, exactly what you said. It's okay to talk to somebody on the phone and get past the who's the alpha part, but just decide you're not going to do business together today.
Yeah.
Maybe it happens in the future. Maybe it doesn't. At least appreciate the conversation, be there for the minute or two that it takes, but it's okay to not do business together. Sometimes people get lost in the idea that it's like do or die, life and death. This call means everything. No, it's, you know what? This is just one of many. And I'm seeing if I can work with this person. So if I can't work with them, I don't, if I can't have fun, why do I want to work with them?
Yeah,
So JT, I think we should wrap it up. We've been on here a while talking about this.
we have. Yeah, it's as always great conversation.
Yeah, well, I love these kind of conversations because we delve into some different stuff. I love talking about finance and all that stuff, but the mindset around all this stuff really matters. And I think the one thing I would tell any new salesperson or anybody venturing into a field that requires sales is first and foremost, I never understood in the very beginning that the difference between sales and marketing. You need both. Both are extremely important skills to learn for every single business owner out there. You can hire a good accountant. It's a lot harder to find a good salesperson, and even harder to find a good marketer.
And the other thing I'll just say to that is you're saying talking about careers that involve sales and everything else. At the end of the day, I feel that sales is a skill that everyone should learn regardless of their profession,
100%.
because ultimately sales is life. Sales is, I mean, we brought in the dating analogies of, hey, are you going to be able to get this person to go out with a date with you? To building friendships, to, hey, even just, well, I'm not in a sales profession. You still have to sell yourself to get that job. I want to move up in my career. You got to sell yourself to move up to the next position.
100%. And I think that, if you want to start learning this stuff, sales is not about selling. Sales is about persuasion. Sales is about getting people to want to be a part of what you're doing. If you want to, the best book I can ever recommend anybody, or audio tape, if you don't read audio tape, audio, that Audacity, Spotify, whatever, you
You
can
you,
find it
you
on
just you
freaking
just
YouTube.
dated yourself there.
I know I was trying to get past that, Jonathan. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that one out, buddy. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Number one book that every person in business must read. I know everybody says Think and Grow Rich. Yes, read the book. Right. How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you don't get something out of that book in every relationship in your life, like every example they give, every chapter, you can be like, oh, that's this person. This is how I get to deal with them to make my life easier. And it gives you tactics. It's like Aikido as opposed to boxing. Like instead of meeting certain things head on, you're now learning to move them to the side and use their own momentum against them and help them create the ideas in their mind for the outcomes that you want. And this is to this day, it's the book that I've read the most. It's the book that has changed the way that I interact with people. And it's the book that I have probably the most underlined and on hand at all times. At all times, I'm reading the book and I finish it and I start rereading it. I never ever am done that book. How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, is the best book of all time that you will learn the basics of selling. I don't think I've given that book enough credit. I want to say it one more time. Read the damn book. It is the best book out there on how to understand relationships and people. There's still not a better one that I'm aware of. Jonathan, on that, anything you'd like to say to wrap it up, sir?
Oh, it's just this topic. Love this topic. Love what we talked about. As we've obviously got the practical examples as far as with our team and understanding that side, the selling side. But I truly do believe that this is so important in life, in every relationship you have. If you understand that while you're interacting with people, understand just the dynamic of where you're at. And if you want to change the dynamic, how you can change your positioning based on the true value you've got in that particular relationship, then really look at it. It's so important.
You know what? They just kind of conjured up memories of when I first started selling and going out into the world and practicing these techniques and how awkward it frickin' felt. This is actually one of the easiest ones, but it requires some thought. A lot of times when you go out there and you're selling, like you still a lot of one-on-one meetings at coffee shops. And I can remember sitting there listening to the words the person's saying and having my own conversation going on at the same time and trying to figure out who's in what position and try to play the position back and forth. Um, the easiest way with this one is just start to observe it. First and foremost, start to observe it. Understand who wants what from whom. When you understand that very basic set of motivators, everything else becomes a lot easier. It really does. Um, just play with it. Go out there and experiment. At first, just observe who's leading this conversation. You can vie for position, but it typically doesn't work if you don't have what the other person wants.
And I'll just say who's leading the conversation. Who's leading the conversation is not necessarily who's doing all the talking.
No, this, it's very, very rare that I find somebody that asks more questions than me. And every once in a while, I do find somebody who's really good at it, especially if I've had a couple glasses of wine. And I'll start talking, and it's very, very infrequent. And I'll look at them after a few minutes, be like, damn, you're good. I don't usually do all the talking. I usually, when I meet somebody, do all the listening. And I've been caught. I remember my friend Nary's dad, may he rest. He caught me one time. We were having wine at their place in Montreal, and I must have talked for about half an hour before I realized that I was doing all the talking. I was like, wow, you're really good. I'm usually the one that asks all the questions. He just had this smile on his face, like, yeah, I've been doing it well. It was a very cool moment. But yeah, understand who's in the alpha position and who's in the beta. Be more thoughtful about your interactions, period. Like a lot of people just go into an interaction thinking, I want this out of it. Understand if you're giving that other person something that they want, and understand if they want it worse or less. If they want it more or less than you want the thing that you want from them, that's who's in the alpha position. Anyhow, JT, wrapping up on that. Thank you for your time. I love the change of position for you and I here today. This was fun. If you want to know more about us, you can certainly go to guidetothegrind.com. We also have an event coming up on September 22nd, the day before the greatest day on earth, my birthday. Uh, you can go to eventbrite.ca, I believe, or Eventbrite. Look for Mortgage Mastery on Eventbrite. We're also going to put it in the description of this video / podcast once it is live. And we really appreciate your time. Thanks for listening to us. We are back now. We've got some major things happening, JT. The future looks bright, and quite truly, it's so bright, I got to wear shades.
It's funny. That's exactly the song that popped into my head.
I went for the prop comedy first.
There you go. There you go. I was gonna pull mine too, because mine were sitting right here, so I was gonna do the exact same thing, but you beat me to it.
No, let's do it. Let's do it, buddy. On that note, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We love you. We love all our listeners. If you have any questions, you can certainly always send us an email at jeff@ableprivatecapital.com or jonathan@amortgageplan.com. Thank you for your time. We will talk to you soon. And JT, you're beautiful, baby.